committee meeting, so if anyone is staying for the meeting, they can have a seat, and if not,
See ya.
right. Caitlin, did you want to come up here, or?
Yeah, let me move.
Yep, you can come
move
up here.
right on out the way. I'll go over that way. I'll go over this way. You have
Are some of our counselors not coming? Because I hate this seat.
That's the seat I have for the whole.
You liked it or no?
Not particularly, but
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. If you can, we're here to discuss the contract between the City of Syracuse and the Land Bank. So if you can kind of give us just an overview of what you guys have done within this new contract and kind of catch us up to speed as to what you've changed, if you've taken out anything.
Well, really, the city's the driving force behind drafting the contract. So we had requested $1 million of funding from the city this year. The mayor put $750,000 in the budget, and this contract divides up that $750,000 in indicates what it can be used for. So $250,000 is restricted for property maintenance expenses, which will be no trouble for us to spend. We'd spent over $250,000 just on spring cleanups in April and May after the snow melted. So I'm sure that we'll spend that money on lawn mowing and debris removal. And then the $500,000 is restricted to blight remediation and demolitions, and that requires a 1-for-1 match. So since the city's fiscal year starts July 1, our plan is to use the $500,000 from the city to do demolitions for the remainder of 2018. And then there's another funding application coming out shortly for additional AG funding, and we're hoping that we'll get over $1 million from the Attorney General's office for demolitions. That grant program would start January 1. So between January 1st and June 30th, we would spend over $500,000 from the AG fulfilling that match requirement in this contract. So $500 from the city, $500 from another source for that match to get at least $1 million of demolitions done in the city's fiscal year. As far as other changes between last year's contract, I would have to defer to Stephanie Pasquale, who's here.
Okay. You can come up.
Good afternoon. The most significant changes in the contract, I think Caitlin explained, are requiring a match for the blight removal section, also requiring that the remaining $250,000 be spent for property maintenance to cover the crux of those funds. We did take out the clawback provision that was in other funding agreements. If some of you have been around for a bit, recall it was tied to how much delinquent taxes we would collect, and then by September 30 of the year after the contract ended, we would let the land bank know whether or not we hit that goal. And because it's sort of outside of the control of the land bank, how much taxes we collect, we took out that provision to make it just a straight up service delivery contract.
Okay.
Oh, I apologize, one more thing. There was also a request, I believe, during the budget hearing for the city contribution in terms of staff time. So there was, at the very end of this agreement, there's a calculation by department of how many full-time equivalents or FTEs are allocated towards this work. And that was our best guess based on, a staff study.
And I should add that, so this requires $1 million of demolitions to be done, and there's also a clause in here saying that has to cover a minimum of 46 houses.
How many do you expect it will actually get to?
Well, it's a little bit weird because of the construction season and timing. So I'm hoping that we'll get 21 to 23 done this year, and at least 23 done between January 1 and June 30th. We've typically done between 50 and 70 demolitions every year, and 2018 is going to be a lot lighter for us just because we did deplete all of our demolition funding at the end of 2017, and we've been kind of waiting to see what would happen with this contract. So we've missed a few months of the season this year. So we might only get 46 really during this fiscal year, but I'm hoping that next calendar year, because we operate on a calendar year, that we'll be back up closer to doing 60 a year. We have a backlog of about 220 demolition candidates in our inventory right now.
Great.
Any other questions?
Caitlin, are you looking into the, I know we've discussed this before, the tax option of Okay, I'm just speaking from the hip now. I've not thought about my words before they come out. But we had spoken before about other income sources for the land bank, and one of them was when you sold a property, you kept 50% of the taxes collected from that property. Are you going to be doing that? Because it seems like, in addition to what we're doing, it seems like you should also be doing that.
Yeah, we've crunched the numbers before, and it seemed like it would return a relatively small amount of revenue each year. So it didn't seem like it was
What would be
the highest priority.
I don't want to, step over a nickel here, but I mean, where it's not like we don't need the money, as small as it may be.
Right, I'll have to go back and take another look at that. I'll send you an email. The mayor had asked me for that analysis during the budget cycle.
That's already been approved at the state level, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it's part of the Land Bank Act,
Yeah,
that
that's
any
all.
land bank can ask for that, and you have to ask the taxing jurisdictions for that 50% 5-year share. So we would have to ask the county, and then, whether or not we go to all the individual towns and villages, where we do about 6 or 7 projects a year outside of the city. It's probably not worth having to debate with every town and village. But so we would ask the county for 50% of the county taxes that get paid after a property gets returned to taxable status. And then the tricky part is with the city and the school district. So because the city and school taxes are on one levy, the city is required to make the school district whole each year. So we had done the math and seen if we asked for 50% of the city tax bill, it would actually put the city in the red for every single one of these properties, and that really wouldn't make much sense.
Couldn't you just do it and exclude the city school tax bill?
That was my question back to the city, was whether or not that's even legally an option. So we needed to do a little bit of research.
There are 2 separate bills.
Well, it's one bill.
Right, but we know the difference.
Right.
When we had discussed this, I think it worked out to maybe $120,000 or $150,000 that we would be splitting up, or maybe that was your final total that you would actually be getting out of it. But at the end of the day, we still need to make the school district whole on that money. That we can't. So whatever that money is, we're end up losing money on the city side.
I think we're
trying to make.
I think we figured that the land bank would maybe net $70,000 a year, and I think just to revisit the big picture, we run a deficit of about $500,000 this year. It'll be even greater next year. So I think we're looking for bigger picture solutions that are going to keep the land bank operating in a way that's sustainable, so we can keep providing public services. So we've been looking, like we talked about before, at possibly increasing the mortgage recording tax or real estate transfer tax that would actually help fill that deficit and subsidize some of the demolitions and new construction and projects that require subsidy that we all want to see as well. We had a positive conversation with the county legislature about that in April when we gave our annual report, and we would need their support because we would need it to be a county-wide initiative. And I've been trying to follow up on that. I'm going to kind of continue to put pressure on the county in this area because I think it could make our whole operation much more sustainable.
Do we need state approval to do that as well?
Yeah, so in that case, the county legislature would pass home rule legislation requesting that the legislature approve the increase. And Erie County's done it many times. The standard for real property transfer tax in New York State is $4 per thousand, and Erie County's up to $9 per thousand, and that's the process, is that the county legislature asks the state legislature to approve it. So we've put the first 10 demolitions out to bid in anticipation of this contract being approved. Like I said, I'm a little bit worried just about the construction season and trying to make sure that we get as many down as we can before it snows. I know it sounds funny to be talking about that on a 100-degree day, but it'll be here before you know it. So I'm hoping that we can get our prices down and exceed that 46, because the lower we get our unit cost, the more houses we can do.
You said you may be able to get to 21 by the end of the year?
I'm hoping we'll do at least 23 by the end of the year.
So are they throughout the city, or are they concentrated in one area? Do you guys have an area that you're focused on?
You know, that's a good question. I'm sorry I don't have the list for you. I will email it out to the counselors. We've definitely identified the first 10, and the remainder of that 23 are still kind of up in the air. But we consult with neighborhood and business development to select these houses and make sure that we're trying to hit what are their priority cases as well. But the first 10 are all properties where the foundations have collapsed. Okay. So
where are they?
I think they're mostly on the south side, but I would have to review the list and get back to you. There's quite a few on the west side as well, and I think one on Tip Hill. But it's one of these situations where the building condition is kind of driving our decisions right now, and we would much rather be choosing these based on planning objectives and knowing if we're going to, work on a block where we have a plan for infill construction and be a little bit more deliberate. Right now, we're just playing catch up based on building condition, and hopefully next year, if we get up to be able to do 60 instead of 20, we'll do a mixture of kind of the crisis ones that have to come down because of fear of collapse and the more planned, deliberate ones for neighborhood revitalization strategies.
And this is just from my own knowledge. How many tenants do you guys have?
We have about 6 or 7 rent-paying tenants, and then probably 24 houses that are receiving relocation assistance.
Okay.
When a property comes to us and it's occupied, we do a conditions evaluation right away, and more often than not, people are living in substandard conditions and the house is beyond repair. So we partner with Catholic Charities to provide relocation assistance in that case. The ones that are paying rent are typically a house that's in better condition. We have a policy that if you're a tenant in the house at the time of foreclosure, you get the first right of refusal to purchase that property, and it usually takes people a while to get mortgage qualified, so we'll lease it to them for a year,
But you guys
18
are
months
helping them
they,
if they wanted to purchase the property?
Yeah. So that's usually why it's a rent-paying tenant, is because they're working with home headquarters to get mortgage qualified and leasing from us in the interim.
And how often has that happened where the tenant actually purchased the home?
I'd say we've had about a dozen of them so far.
Okay.
I just want to ask another question, because I don't know if I was dreaming, but I don't know if this is reality. Were you talking about the dollar houses again?
We haven't talked about that in quite a while.
Well, I must have been dreaming. Okay.
Thank you.
Rich has a question for you related to the contract.
Rich Pachowski, Executive Director, Syracuse United Neighbors. We support the budget when it was adopted, that the land bank get its funding back on board. We're glad to see that we're at this point in terms of actually moving forward. With that said, one of the worst things to be walking around the neighborhood, and as many vacant houses that I've been through, is to see a burnt out structure. And it would behoove the city to move in a quicker pace than it does to knock these structures down. They smell and smell and smell, and they're sites of people getting back in. Case in point, the one on Midland Ave near Kennedy that I see a couple times a day. I've complained numerous times to Ken Towsley about that structure that has debris from the fire next door to an occupied house. I've complained, and I get no action. And, the DPW trucks, missed it again. Well, that's not my problem. So there are burnout structures. There's one on Merriman, if not 2. I know recently you took down one on Chaunard. But I don't understand why the city doesn't have emergency funds to remove structures, when we get past when a fire has occurred on a structure. And so I would hope that at least a couple of these properties are on that top of that list, Caitlin.
The burnout on Merriman is.
I hope the one on Merriman is. You people need to get out and walk around these buildings. Hopefully one of these days, Khalid, we're going to hear more of a discussion about putting houses up on the southwest side. People don't look at me.
Thank you. All right. All right. If no one has any further questions, we'll call this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was funny.